hammer comes down and beats you over the head for the rest of your life with a big national security stick. And so that people learn to duck their head and not speak up, because bad idea now.
Seek ye the truth, and the truth will make you free, and nothing else will do it. Jesus Christ has never lied to anybody. Why won't you listen to him?
And man will either worship the one true God, or man will worship a lie.
You must stay away from people who will not document as fact what they put in their articles. That's why my broadcast scares the hell out of socialists. That's why I was named as the most dangerous radio host in America, because I shoot documented facts which cannot be refuted. That's what's dangerous. Don't spread a rumor. Spread the truth. Document it. Prove it. Make it irrefutable, and you too will become dangerous.
It's time to speak out. Speak out. Speak out.
Blog and Facebook.
Shout it out to your neighbors and tell everyone you know.
You see, what happens when you broadcast the truth is you piss everybody off.
Faith is resistance.
Welcome to Armor of Truth Live, number 424. Should Donald Trump invade and remove Venezuelan dictator Nicolás Maduro? Well, Venezuela is in the news in a big way lately, huh? The media is framing it as a rising tension, a personal conflict between U.S. President Donald Trump and Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro. All these political pundits want you to pay attention to that personal rivalry. But when Nicolás Maduro stands on a balcony in Caracas, Bolivarian sword in hand, declaring his absolute loyalty to the people of Venezuela, you're not watching a lonely strong man improvising policy. You're seeing another node in a global system, a neo-Marxist, communo-fascist regime that speaks the language of social justice while wielding cocaine, cartels, and terror networks as weapons against you, against the American citizens. It has been doing it for years now. So in this show, we want to give you an inside scoop on who Maduro is. Who is he loyal to? Who does he work for? We're going to look at some case studies. And we want to give you a framework for how to read these headlines and understand these stories. And of course, as always, a biblical lens that will expose the spiritual lie underneath the entire project. So the first question is, who is Nicolás Maduro? What exactly is he trying to accomplish in Venezuela? What is his role as a key convergence point, a hub in a larger post-Soviet, neo-Marxist, anti-American bloc aligned with China, Iran, sometimes Russia, and of course international terrorist organizations like Hezbollah. And of course there are the cartels, MS-13, who are firmly ensconced in our country right now, thanks to an open border policy that is really a death wish. And that's really what we're talking about here tonight, is the progressive death wish. Speaking of cartels, what is the purpose of cartel activity inside the United States? Is Maduro himself personally responsible for funding and facilitating the recent spike in drug trafficking, responsible for poisoning and killing Americans in alarming, never-before-seen numbers, particularly our young people, those who would be the leaders, the future leaders of the United States, those who would be making up the heart of the middle class. You see how that works. Hollow out the middle class, and you can achieve your neo-Marxist, communo-fascist, communitarian, progressivist New World Order. Also, is Maduro a major facilitator in the migration crisis? We might call it the invasion into the United States through the southern border. Is Maduro aligned with or an instrument of a global socialist project to corrupt, erode, and weaken America from within? That's what's at stake. That's why we're asking a hard question. Should Trump remove Maduro? So we can boil all of this down to two questions. Is Nicolás Maduro at war with the American people? Is Maduro at war with you? And what can we learn from the recent history of this, of Venezuela itself? Where did Maduro come from? Who was there before him? How did Venezuela go from one of the wealthiest nations in the world to, in a period of about 3 decades, to utter destitution, starvation? How do we protect ourselves from internal and external threats who most certainly intend to bring America down? So this is not just another media story. This is not just another media story. It's not just another distraction. This is an important event here. And as we look at it and try to understand it for what it really is, there is actionable intelligence here that can empower us to an effective defense of our nation, our liberty, and our way of life, which is, if you hadn't noticed, surely under attack. Venezuela is not an anomaly. Maduro is not a lone strongman. This is a warning shot. So what we'll see here is a clear example of concentrated evil and exactly what the broader progressive project, you might call it the New World Order, goes by many names. What does it seek? Well, we know what it seeks. It seeks a world freed from God, governed by planners, central planners, and parties, and paid for in human misery. But none of this information is useful unless we think about it biblically. So let's dive into it and empower ourselves with the truth. Before we do that, let's welcome to the show lovely Summer.
Excellent. Excellent to be here. Woo-hoo.
All right, welcome. So, Summer, here's what we're going to talk about. How can we demonstrate that Nicolás Maduro, is an external threat to America? How do we show that he is truly at war with the American people? That's really one of his primary goals. First, look at how the people of Venezuela, again, once among the most prosperous in the world, to the shocking conditions of poverty and authoritarian oppression they experience today. Look at a couple of these articles to give you an idea of how the narrative is playing out, and then we'll dig into it and show you what's really going on underneath it. Okay. So it does seem that there are some rumblings out there that Trump might do something that many would consider drastic. Trump has warned Maduro to abdicate his office and leave Venezuela if he knows what's good for him. He's given him an ultimatum. Leave now or else. So that's what's been happening over the past little while. What's been going on is American forces have actually been amassing. Well, the aircraft carrier Gerald R. Ford is in the region, in the waters near Venezuela, as we speak, patrolling, riding dirty, right?
Little outcast. AT aliens.
Yeah. And of course, Trump's been blowing up drug traffickers coming to the Caribbean in their vessels, headed to America with their poison. And I don't mean just say that. I'm not just saying that drugs are bad. Okay? I'm just saying these are not drugs, right? Summer, tell us just for a second. What have we learned about the drugs? These are not drugs.
Yeah,
people are not overdosing, right?
These are poisons meant to take people out.
People are being poisoned.
Yeah, people are being poisoned.
Because here's why we say they're being poisoned. Because if you have a 19-year-old who thinks he's going to go, he gets his contact, Snapchat or whatever. I don't know how they do it these days, but that seems to be one of the ways.
Snapchat is one of the ways.
Yeah. And they want a couple Percocets, painkillers.
Or some Adderall.
Right.
Or some Xanax.
Right. It could be any of those things. They have no idea what they're getting.
Or they think they're doing designer drugs.
Yeah.
And it's laced with...
And sometimes it's laced with, there's a little bit of... They have pill presses now.
That look exactly like pharmaceutical grade.
The cartels have pill presses so they can make...
Well, it's like who's enabling that?
Well, yeah.
Well,
we know that, of course, Maduro is a international hub for this kind of activity.
Right. I'm saying that sarcastically.
Yeah.
It's like we've got this whole thing set up so that it looks like it's coming from this one entity, and everybody's pointing a finger in a different direction. But ultimately, what it serves is the erasure of Christian civilization, because by doing this, they're wiping out like sometimes 200 or 300 people a day. Right. And this is primarily the middle class and primarily young kids.
200 or 300 people a day.
200 or 300 people a day are dying. And yet we're supposed to be going nuts about whatever happened with the virus, Like it's like, oh, look at this over here, but meanwhile we're doing all this over here. So we've been talking about fentanyl for years now. We've been covering it. We haven't covered it publicly in depth in a long while, but it's certainly on the radar. And we've been doing a lot of research into this, and it really does seem undeniable that not only with fentanyl and how they are in all of the drugs, whether it's street drugs or designer drugs, they're making it onto college campuses, and there's definitely an operation to take out the next generation. It's like 19-year-olds, early 20-somethings, really early 20-somethings, and 19-year-olds, and even younger. And then not only that, but the medicalization of marijuana, actually, as it turns out,
cannabis psychosis
brings on a violent cannabis psychosis. And
I was skeptical about that at first.
Yeah, I was too.
It's a thing.
But when you take something and it goes from 2 to 3% potency, and then all of a sudden it's at 15 or 40 or 60 or 99 in these edibles, in a market that is unregulated, but you've got all of this marketing telling you that this has got healing benefits, and that that this is good for you, or it's medical, for medical situations, and thus it disarms people. And I think more and more people now are waking up to the fact that with these high concentrations, who's to say what's really in these? I mean, what is it? What is it exactly? And it's causing schizophrenia, and it's causing psychosis, and a lot of times it's causing people to be violent, and they actually murder people. And then they have to live with that for the rest of their lives if they don't die in that process, that I just killed my friend. This is not a joke. And these drugs are getting inside the border. So say what you will, but yeah, for sure, there's precedent to try to do everything that we can to shut that down.
So we're going to show you in just a few minutes that Nicolás Maduro is, again, he is not at the top, but he is an instrument, particularly for this region, for this kind of nonlinear warfare, this attack,
Asymmetrical.
that we're experiencing now. We'll get to that in a second, but we were talking about how many deaths. This is how significant this is. During the height of the COVID scam, damn it. I mean, you know, that thing.
Yeah. Which was all about bow the knee and submit. I mean, that's what that was about.
About 73, you know, at the height of it, which was about, you know, which was really just a few months. It worked out to be about 73,000 people. No, I'm sorry, that's the, it was hundreds. It got up into the 100s per day. You know,
right. And
now
I mean,
we're
who
going.
knows, it could have been other things that were taking them out. You know
we're
what I'm
going.
saying?
These are the official statistics, and we know that those are going to be extremely inflated.
And then we know what the effects are with the jabby jab.
People were dying with all kinds of things that were being called COVID. But anyway,
unnecessary medical intervention.
So even in the inflated numbers, got up into the 100s area per day. As Summer just said, over 200 per day are dying right now and have been for years through this poisoning. And that works out to be about 73,000 per year.
So think about so that's wiping out Americans.
Yes.
Because the target is primarily the middle class, white American is the target audience, and that's just, that's what's happening. So
the middle class, definitely it is hitting the middle class hardest, and that's by design, shall we say? So
that's Marxism in policy to bring about, the sustainable development technocracy.
With all of the hysteria and mania and attention that was given to the scamdemic C-19 deal, it has not. It hasn't even come close to touching this particular catastrophe that's happening inside America right now.
Right. And then, we have to just mention again what we were speaking about in the last show with Reverend Matthew Littlefield about how the kids, through the social emotional learning programs coming from UNESCO, which, by the way, this curricula is all around the Western world. So it's not just a phenomenon that's happening in America. Reverend Littlefield was saying that it's happening in Australia as well. Like, we connected that on that podcast together. He didn't know that it was happening over here, but the fact that, if you look at Gen Z, they're all having the same reaction to authority. It's like no matter where they are in the country, and apparently it's happening in Australia, and of course it's then going to be happening throughout the wider Western world. These kids have been indoctrinated such that they have an allergy to any sort of authority or consequence, and so they go into these literal meltdowns, which we're going to show you in the future too. We're going to have a show about that to show you what's happening with the young generation now. So that's another way in which people, people have been weaponized because this is overwhelming for the system. If you're driving drunk and you get pulled over and you're drinking underage and you're putting lives at risks, and then the cops are coming to put you in handcuffs, and then your reaction is don't touch me, and you have a total meltdown and you start biting and screaming and banging your head against the wall inside the car cockpit, like there is something wrong there, and then you'll hear, oh, you're such an oppressor, you think you're big, you think you're strong, you man, I don't want to be touched by men, don't touch me, don't, where is this coming from? This is coming from somewhere, right? And and so that's one of the ways also in which the system, it's from different angles, they have been institutionalizing this asymmetrical warfare against the American people and against people that are freedom-loving individuals who recognize that their rights come from God's moral law, essentially. That is the culture that they are actively working to erase.
Right, and we do know where this is coming from, don't we? We know the ideology. Now, what's fascinating is there's no way that Nicolás Maduro actually believes in this ideology, but he is expressing it and affirming it out loud, and that tells you who controls him, ultimately. So let's dig into this a little bit. Should Trump go in there and remove Maduro? Well, let's consult the Pope, shall we? Let's see what the Pope thinks should be done here, who is an American from Chicago. Also spent some time in South America. That's, anyway, here, Pope Leo warns against military action in Venezuela. The Pope urged the U.S. to seek dialogue. We're just trying to have a conversation here, Summer, right? That's what they always say. Instead of pursuing military incursion. Well, Pope says there's this danger, this possibility that there could be an action, an operation, including an invasion of Venezuelan territory. I again believe it is better to seek dialogue within this pressure, as if that hasn't been done. As at some point, the talking stops. So the Pope has really told Trump that he should stand down, to not intervene in Venezuela. And that reveals quite a lot about the new Pope's ideological, ethical, and theological commitments. Here's why. The first point, and why American military should go in there and remove Nicolás Maduro. And that's because what we've just been talking about, for one thing, the Maduro regime's well-documented internal corruption, for one thing, and criminality against their own citizens. That would be enough to justify a U.S. military intervention in Venezuela. However, given their also well-documented anti-American rhetoric, the cartel activity, their direct involvement, Maduro's direct involvement in this asymmetric, nonlinear, fifth-generation warfare. It doesn't look like regular warfare where troops come across the border or they drop bombs on you. It looks like people dying in the streets from being poisoned. It looks like gangs living in your city, wreaking havoc, destabilizing. Maduro is directly involved in this kind of operation, this kind of attack, nonlinear warfare against and inside the United States through the direct facilitation of the illegal flow of migrants, violent prisoners. Remember, they emptied out their prisons and sent them up through the southern border. Along with them came MS-13 gang members. And, of course, the most lethal narcotics the world has ever seen. And that is not hyperbole. That is a fact. And, as we pointed out here, that for many years now, they've been killing more than 200 people per day, 200 Americans per day, who are overdosing, or more accurately, being poisoned by fentanyl, xylazine, trank dope, and other things. And, of course, also there is, as we mentioned, the migrant violence itself. So with all of that, just the corruption and the criminality against the regime's own people would be enough to do something. But this is war. We're at war, whether we've declared it or not. So this means that a U.S. military operation to depose or perhaps even neutralize, if he doesn't want to abdicate and vacate, perhaps even neutralize Maduro himself. That would not only be legal and constitutionally justified, it would be ethically, morally, and theologically justified. So the Pope is way off base here. Every person who enlists in the United States Armed Forces and the National Guard takes a required oath of enlistment. That includes the solemn promise to support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And the oath also includes to bear true faith and allegiance to the same, and to obey the orders of the President of the United States and the orders of their superior officers according to the regulations and the Uniform Code of Military Justice. So help me God. Likewise, the President swears an oath when he takes office to faithfully execute the office of the President of the United States and to preserve and protect and defend the Constitution of the United States, which means to protect and defend the people, because the people are the government in America. Each member of the legislative branch, the Congress, the Senate, also takes the same oath as the President, but with a notable additional promise. Now, this is the branch of government who is given the authority to declare war. Now, we haven't declared a war in decades, but we've been in a lot of them, haven't we? But the legislative branch takes that same oath, but with this included: the promise, the affirmation, the oath to well and faithfully discharge the duties of the office on which I am about to enter, so help me God. Well and faithfully do my job as it is defined. So, what does this tell us about the Pope's true allegiance? Is he committed to God? If he believes that it would be unjust for the President and the U.S. military to intervene against an external threat who has been and continues to commit acts of war against the American people directly, then the Pope cannot claim allegiance to God. Because God has ordained all government with the power of the sword. That means violence, when justified, to restrain evil, punish the wicked, and protect the good. Does the Pope advocate biblical justice or social justice? Is he aligned with the laws and the expectations and commitments of his own homeland, or is he aligned more with Nicolás Maduro? Exactly to whom does Pope Leo give his allegiance and his most solemn commitments? Well, we'll tell you exactly who in just a bit. We'll tell you exactly who the Pope is really loyal to. But the evidence is clear. America is being infiltrated, and a generation of young people, America's future leaders, the crucial future middle class, are being poisoned in unprecedented numbers. also killed by gang violence from migrants at unprecedented levels. But America's own Marxists, the radical left, not even radical, most of the left, and some of the rhinos, some of the Republicans in name only, are claiming that Trump and Secretary of War Pete Hegseth are guilty of murder for blowing up these drug traffickers in the water, for killing them. And they say, because we're not officially at war. We haven't declared war. The question that's not being addressed is this. Is someone at war with us? And can it be shown that they are truly trying to weaken our nation through these operations, this non-conventional warfare? Our ultimate authority is not the media, the government, or even the president. Definitely not the leftist ideologues. Our authority is Scripture. And so the Bible is clear. A truthful, faithful interpretation of Scripture tells us about self-defense and the use of deadly force when necessary. When defending our families, when defending other people who are being attacked. And the same goes for the leader of the nation. Just like a man is bound by Scripture to defend his family, even with violence if it's necessary and justified, so is the president. This nation is his house to defend. And so our authority is Scripture. So whether war has been declared by the politicians or not, we're at war. So let's build this case out. Jump in, because I'll get to the empire of the city here in just a bit. But jump in whenever you might have to flag me down, because I've got that mic muted. It's picking up the road noise out there, the drag strip. So let's look at the first case study. The Department of Justice. Right here. You can look at this. In March of 2020, the U.S. Department of Justice unsealed a narco-terrorism indictment against Nicolás Maduro and other senior Venezuelan officials, one of which we will show you here in just a minute. The allegation is stark. For 20 years, Maduro and his circle partnered with the Colombian FARC guerrillas to flood the United States with cocaine, and as the years went on, these new super deadly poisons. In the words of U.S. Attorney, they use cocaine deliberately. They use these drugs, these poisons, deliberately as a weapon against the health and well-being of American people. So this is not about normal corruption. Here's the unsealed indictment. It's hard to read. From at least in or about 1999, up to and including in or about 2020, when this document was unsealed, Nicolás Maduro Moros, Diosdado Cabello Rondon, and several other characters, the defendants named here, participated in, let's see if I can do this, participated in a corrupt and violent narco-terrorism conspiracy between the Venezuelan cartel de los Soles and the Fuerzas Armadas Revolucionarias de Colombia. That's FARC. To be careful when you say that one. So this is not a conspiracy theory. This is nonlinear warfare, using narcotics as a destabilizing tool, weapon, destroying families, hollowing out communities, and weakening the very population that might otherwise resist totalitarian ideas. This is what we mean by communo-fascism. On the one hand, you have hard left socialism, and Maduro comes up out of the tradition of Hugo Chavez, who we'll talk about more here in just a minute. I'll lay out exactly what his beliefs were, and who in Europe, particularly the UK, he might have taken some cues from. So on the one hand, you have hard left socialism, state control of industry, hatred of capitalism, hatred of America, and now you have it expressed in rhetoric of social justice and protecting the poor, they say. And on the other hand, you have fascist methods, a police state fused with organized crime, a ruling clique above the law, and the weaponization of violence, and of course fear. That's a big element of this operation, is to create fear. The Department of Justice indictment simply pulled the curtain back on this. It showed that behind Maduro's speeches about the people and his loyalty to them stands a cartelized state willing to poison those people and ours for power, for prestige. And notice this, if you're willing to treat cocaine and now fentanyl as a weapon, you don't see human beings as image bearers of God. You see them as expendable material, cannon fodder, raw fuel for your revolution. And that's not all. We're just getting started. How about this? Solidarity with China. This comes from the Friends of Socialism website. Consider the partnership between Venezuela and the People's Republic of China. In 2023, Xi Jinping and Nicolás Maduro met in Beijing and publicly upgraded their relationship to a, quote, all-weather strategic partnership, a status China reserves for its closest partners and allies. Venezuela pledged active support for the Belt and Road Initiative. That's the trading of technology, particularly. You know, Chinese technology comes into the United States, and we don't know what's in there. In fact, this summer we talked about this with, I'm forgetting his name. No, about if the power grid went down.
Oh, Jonathan Hollerman.
Jonathan Hollerman. Mm-hmm. That most of the huge transformers in our nation are manufactured in China.
Yeah.
And
isn't that comforting?
Is there a back door? Is there a switch, a remote switch to shut that down or blow it up? Because if those things go down, they don't get replaced tomorrow or next week or next month or 6 months from now. Those things take 18 months to replace sometimes. So if a lot of those went down at one time, you're going to have some big problems.
And that's of course they're well aware of that, you know. The fact that that's
exactly that's
vulnerability, you know, it's like
that's asymmetrical warfare.
And that's what they always do, is like it's always plausible deniability, like, oh, because this, that, and because that, this, and oh, we didn't know, and let me just blame it over here to this.
Plausible deniability, hey? Mm-hmm. So Venezuela and China agreed on many broader global initiatives to work toward these global initiatives together. One of those is to weaken and bring down the West. And by the West, they mean the United States of America. Because if the U.S. falls, so does all the West. China also committed to deepen economic, trade, and infrastructure ties with Venezuela. even as the West attempted to isolate Caracas at this moment. What does this mean, though? First of all, it means the Chinese Communist Party sees Maduro as a reliable partner in building a world order that is explicitly post-Western, post-American, and post-liberal. And by liberal, we mean classical liberalism, political philosophy that was an important part of the founding of America. Second, it gives Maduro economic oxygen. Oil, mining, infrastructure deals, and technology from China help keep his regime alive. They are an oil-rich nation. And so this helps keep them going despite any sanctions that might come from the West, or, it helps prevent a complete collapse of Venezuela. It is not thriving. Those who are in charge are thriving, but the people are suffering there. Third, it ties Venezuela's future to a global bloc that rejects biblical assumptions about law, personhood, and liberty, and replaces that with, drumroll please, a technocratic one-party rule. So, in other words, Venezuela is not an isolated failure. It is an outpost of a larger neo-Marxist, Leninist ecosystem anchored in Beijing, for one, and Moscow, for two, reaching out into Latin America, Africa, and the Middle East, because we also have Venezuela's connection to Hezbollah. And we've talked about this before here, haven't we, Summer? Well, Hezbollah particularly in league with the cartels. Hamas too, but Hamas has the tunnel building, tunnel digging skills, and the cartel finds that very useful because that's how they...
Right, and they're also in very strong connection with the Islamic world as well.
Yeah, that's what we're getting to now. So Iran, for one, that Khomeini was in Iran was one of those who offered Maduro safe passage to his nation. He could come there if he had to leave, if he decided to leave, if he wasn't willing to risk decapitation. Serious research by groups like the Atlantic Council and others documents an extensive relationship between the Maduro regime and Hezbollah, the Iran-backed Islamist organization. Venezuela has provided a permissive environment for Hezbollah facilitators, terrorists, through providing visas, ID documents, and free reign to conduct money laundering, drug trafficking, and financial operations. This is the crime, terror nexus, right? That's what Venezuela really represents in our neck of the woods, sort of. They're close enough. It's just a short plane ride from there to here. Drug cartels and corrupt state officials move these deadly narcotics and poisons. Fentanyl, you put it this way, the fentanyl that's manufactured by pharmaceutical companies is a little different because it's pure, it's more regulated, you know exactly what you're getting. You have no idea the purity that you're getting. This is why so many people fall over dead. People who have high tolerances to these kinds of drugs fall over dead. They don't even know they've taken it. Hezbollah and other terrorist actors plug in to these networks, plug into this Venezuelan international hub, and use it to raise money and move people and goods around, which is what we saw really from particularly late 2020, 2021, and 2022, all through Biden's presidency, with these people flooding in through the southern border. So the result of this is a transnational web that funds both secular socialist regimes and Islamist terror groups. Different religions, same hatred of America. So again, the pattern is lethal narcotics as a weapon, China as a strategic patron, and Islamists and Hezbollah particularly as a criminal terror partner. And it's not random. This is a shared project of anti-Christian, anti-liberty power centers using each other's strengths, through ideology, technology, drugs, terror, to undermine what is left of Christian-influenced order in the West. Now, at the top, you said, I made the point that here's more about Hezbollah, by the way, and Maduro's regime. Maduro is not this lone figure, this lone dictator. He is a communo-fascist strongman. And he's not unique. He's just another iteration of what we've seen across Latin America in recent decades. For example, Fidel Castro in Cuba is a similar figure. Ortega in Nicaragua, the Sandinistas, various Peronist currents, and others. Over and over, the pattern is similar. It's there. It doesn't take a Sherlock Holmes to find it. And it looks like this. First, revolutionary promise. The movement promises justice for the poor. They promise an end to corruption and liberation from the Yankee imperialism. That would be America. Secondly, centralization of power. Once these figures like Maduro get into office, they rewrite the Constitution, which is exactly what he did in his first act in office this time. The first time he came in as well. Then they capture the courts, neutralize the legislature, and then they pack the military and the police with their own people, the loyalists. Third, then they fuse the party, the state, and crime in one beast. The line between state revenue and criminal revenue just disappears. Cartels, smugglers, and corrupt officials become a single ecosystem working together to destroy America. Fourth comes the anti-American, anti-Western ideology. Their ideology, which is expressed in their rhetoric, is consistently anti-capitalist, anti-American, anti-Christian, painting biblical morality as colonial and Western liberty as oppressive. Isn't that funny? Again, this is communo-fascism. And we see this also take place in the Middle East through the Red-Green Alliance, right? Which is the alliance between
Marxism.
Marxist communism, specifically Marxism, and Islamist regimes.
Correct.
Iran is one right now that really fits that bill. Communo-fascism, left-wing economics, planned economies, collectivism, welfare dependency, and then right-wing methods. Again, as we pointed out here, to look at fascism and communism as opposite sides of the paradigm is insufficient. It's fallacious. They're both left. They're both collectivist. They're both totalitarian. But you see, right-wing methods like secret police, propaganda, street militias, and cults of personality, all wrapped in progressivist moral language about equality, anti-racism, and social justice. Maduro openly walks in the path of Hugo Chavez. Hugo Chavez baptized Marxist class struggle in what's known as Bolivarian nationalism and quasi-religious language. Maduro's regime then, in his first time he was not elected really, but when he took office, he took over for Chavez. So in his first go-round, he deepened the cartel connections, the criminal side, especially through narco-terror. Narco-terror, if you're unsure about that term, that's people falling over dead in the streets. People kids, young people, going to sleep in their beds at home and not waking up. That's narco-terror. That's what we're looking at today. It has been in the past more about heroin and cocaine, and it might be found on the seedier side of town, but no, now it's everywhere. But there's also alliances with global powers that share Maduro's hatred of Western Christian-influenced civilization. And then there is this character who is very closely related, works with, I'm going to have to get his picture of him up here for you because he's quite a character. Alex Saab. Let me get a picture of this guy up here for you, but he's a scary looking character. Here we go. Yeah. Yeah, if you run into this guy in the alley, better run the other way. Here we go. Maduro on the left, Alex Saab on the right. Who is this guy? Well, enter Alex Saab, who is now Nicolás Maduro's Minister of Industry and National Production. He is not a philosopher. He is a mechanism. He is himself a weapon. His companies won huge contracts to provide housing and food to the poor, especially through something called the CLAP Food Box program in Venezuela. And what he did through this humanitarian charity organization, he siphoned hundreds of millions of dollars through overvalued no-bid contracts and offshore shell companies. And that's why the U.S. Treasury sanctioned him and why he was indicted for money laundering. But what does it tell us? What is the rise of this cat right here being a primary advisor to this cat right here? What does it tell us? Well, this idea, once again, the socialist rhetoric, it always plays out the same. Whether it's Lenin, Stalin, Mao, Pol Pot, others, many others, it always works out the same. It never ends up in what they promised. Socialist rhetoric, like housing for all. We're going to feed the people. Mamdani wants to create government grocery stores, right? That's going to work out great. We've got many models for how great it's worked out in the past. Look at Venezuela, for example. That's exactly what they did. Government-run grocery stores. And soon after, starvation. But this rhetoric, housing for all, feed the poor, becomes the justification for giving this small circle of cronies total control over Venezuela's resources, particularly oil and many other commodities and natural resources. So you have to understand these things. You don't just trip into this lifestyle. Corruption's not an accident. This is the system. This is the global progressivist system, and it originates out of Geneva. This kind of activity funds the regime, buys loyalty, and punishes dissent. So when Maduro made this guy a cabinet minister after a high-profile prisoner swap, that is Maduro sending a message. He's saying that his regime will protect its own and reward those who keep the machine running. And they will oppress and squash the opposition or any dissent. Alex Saab is a walking illustration of how progressivist slogans about equity and social welfare can be weaponized, and usually are, in this context, to build a patrimonial mafia state that hates Jesus Christ, hates liberty, America, and really hates the poor that they claim to want to help. All right, so, and I've got a little bit, I want to talk to you about how to read these headlines a little bit. I'll get to that in just a bit. But now, Summer, let's talk, you want to talk a little bit about the empire of the city. Now, because what we've laid out here for everybody so far is the ideology and the political philosophy, if you want to call it that, of Maduro and what's been going on in Venezuela. I can run down quickly. Let me run down a little bit of the history of Venezuela for you so that you understand that Maduro he didn't happen in a vacuum. He has a mentor. Maduro is heir to Hugo Chavez's Bolivarian revolution, which positioned itself as a project of what they call, quote, 21st century socialism, which is anti-capitalist, anti-imperialist, and oriented toward popular power and social property. I have one here. Let's see. Yeah, here's Maduro saying, we don't want a slave's peace. This comes from India Times. Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro rejected a slave's peace, a quote-unquote slave's peace, responding to Trump's suggestion that he'd get out of Dodge. Maduro accused Washington of testing Venezuela with a prolonged naval deployment. Basically, Trump gave Maduro an ultimatum. What Maduro said in response to this, in front of his people, of course, telling thousands of his supporters in Caracas that the country, Venezuela, quote, does not want a slave's peace. He accused Washington of testing, let's see, no, I'm just repeating myself now. I got to scoot down here in the article a little bit. He says, we want peace, but peace with sovereignty, equality, freedom. We don't want a slave's peace, nor the peace of colonies, he told the crowd, before swearing absolute loyalty. This is how he responded to Trump telling him, we're on to you. Watch out. We know what you're doing. We know what you're doing to us. Let's see here. This is also Maduro mentioned today. He finally commented on the phone call he had with Donald Trump, and he was superficially magnanimous about it. But Maduro comes out of this tradition of Bolivarianism, which began with Hugo Chavez. Their party, the party that Maduro dominates, that he sits at the head of, that runs Venezuela, is the United Socialist Party of Venezuela, which we will call the PSUV from now on. That party, that United Socialist Party of Venezuela, formally rejects capitalism and imperialism and, as Maduro said, quote, elite-dominated representative democracy. They reject representative democracy. Interesting, right? But what they believe in is a transition of Venezuela to a full-on communist state via what they call communal councils and popular power structures. Who is Maduro? What's his background? He was a lifelong union activist and bus driver. And this background allows him to frame himself as an organic working class socialist. It frames him as someone who believes in organic working class socialism. That's Lenin. That's exactly how Vladimir Lenin came. That's the context, the narrative under which he came in to power after the Russian Revolution. But what this does, this background, this narrative that he's created for himself, it gives him, he repeats this in speeches, and it allows him to claim to be identified with the poor and the workers. Maduro's political philosophy blends Bolivarian nationalism with neo-Marxist themes, particularly, again, anti-imperialism, anti-U.S., talking a lot about class struggle against the oligarchs and the bourgeois democracy. He says that popular power, which is communism, and is superior to the bourgeois parliamentarianism. Now, here's an important part, because, Summer, if it's Marxist, then we have to look for the themes and elements of alienation and oppression, right? So here's where that comes in. Venezuela really is a mostly homogeneous society, more or less the same ethnicity. There aren't, there's really one class there now, and it's all poor. So if you're going to build alienation and oppression there, and if you're Maduro, the only people that they can feel alienated by and oppressed by would be him. So he has to direct that energy somewhere else. So how does he do it? Where does he direct the people's energy to build this narrative of oppression? Again, consider the anti-imperialist, anti-colonialist, and what Maduro said. He said himself, I am anti-imperialist, anti-colonialist, and anti-racist. That mirrors the language of global neo-Marxist movements and post-colonial progressivism.
And I would say that it's not really a coincidence that this incident with Venezuela is happening right now, as we're also hearing a lot more about what's happening in South Africa between, Trump and Ramaphosa. So that's ramping up too, because what it does is for the global syndicated media outlets, they can capitalize on this situation and do all of their spin, which makes America look like the evil, white supremacist evil empire, because they've all been conditioned through UNESCO's curricula, World Core curricula, to be primed for that. So, so it's worth noting all the things that pop off at once,
Right. So So to think about this in terms of South Africa too, they've done the same thing there.
Mm-hmm. Yes. You alienate the native population, the dominant culture.
But in South Africa, they're predominantly Black Africans.
Well, now they are. Since they did the same thing, they flooded South Africa. In the beginning, it was like basically there were no people there, when the first settlers arrived. Yeah. So then they flooded it.
So how do they build a narrative of oppression and alienation when you have a lot of the same class and ethnicity around? Well, in Venezuela, much the way they do it in South Africa, you have to find an enemy or oppressor somewhere out there. The government in South Africa, and the government in Venezuela are the oppressors, but they're the ones setting the narrative and running it. So,
Or Rhodesia is another example that people are talking a lot about
yeah.
with the farmers and taking the land and such.
So they have to point that energy somewhere else. Where do they point it? In Venezuela? Again, Maduro says we are anti-imperialist, anti-colonialist, anti-racist. This explicitly situates his regime within this global anti-capitalist, anti-Western struggle. So this is the triad: anti-imperialist, anti-colonialist, anti-racist. And the way they frame this now, this post-colonial progressivism, where do they find the enemy? He frames it in Venezuela as in a north-south oppression narrative, right? This idea now of the global South,
Right, which we've talked
who
about.
is oppressed by
Yeah.
Western civilization.
Right. So we've written extensively for several years now that BRICS is an Anglosphere creation. That BRICS was not, in fact, a challenge to the West or anything like that at all. It was conceived by Sir Jim O'Neill of Goldman Sachs and stewarded through the Chatham House, which is a Crown think tank. And this
Crown.
yeah, the
Did you say the Crown?
the Commonwealth of Nations, and this makes BRICS an instrument of Anglo-global elites, not a rebellion against them. And so, the narrative of Russia or China taking over hides the deeper reality, because what we're dealing with is the same Western networks grooming these systems into a global architecture. So BRICS is not some sort of formidable rising power that's going to overtake and create some liberation from whatever it is that they've indoctrinated everybody in schools with. It's actually the greatest colonization that the earth has ever known, because of the powers of what they can do with, the digital gulag of shutting people out through the social credit score and controlling people's behavior by way of access to services and goods. So, just to think this dynamic of the global South versus the West, and how it's vying for power. No, that's actually just part of the theatrics. That's part of the theatrics of the narrative. So.
Right. Now let's right. So what you're getting closer to the idea of who's at the top of the progressive death wish? Who's at the top of this anti-West, this communist, basically,
Which many know of
would
it
call progressivist,
is the empire of the city, which we've written about before.
and
But it
now
comes into play again.
let me break it. Let me explain Maduro. This a little bit the history of Venezuela, because what this shows you is through Chavez and a particular connection with the UK, how that progressivist movement is working with people like Chavez and Maduro and other Middle Eastern dictators. Anyway, so social justice, equity, rejection of models of, Maduro said he rejects models of selfish accumulation of wealth for a few. Well, that's rich, isn't it? Coming from the narco-terrorist himself, who is accumulating the wealth for him and his friends. He said that in that was quoted in official Cuban-Venezuelan solidarity text defending the Venezuelan revolution, which was where Chavez came to power. So in this kind of system, the people are seen as a unified moral subject, like a collective, a moral collective, who are pitted against what they call the oligarchs, fascists, and imperialists. It's always gaslighting, isn't it? It's always
projection. Yeah,
yeah.
we're living in the inverse reality. It really is bitter for sweet and sweet for bitter. And so the best way you can hide is by accusing your opponent of being the thing that you are. I mean, it's the best way to hide. to sit there and say, you're a Nazi, you're a fascist, you're a supremacist, blah, 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 when in fact that's what they're doing.
It is. It's exactly how it works. It's how it's always been. Right from Marx and into Lenin and right on through the rest of them.
Yeah, it's a psychological mind game. I mean, they've infiltrated psychology and psychiatry, and then of course they've also infiltrated education, and they've Marxified with critical theory. Even math has been, gone through the ringer to be ideologically subverted.
Ideologically subverted, which can be explained this way. And this comes down from the top of the progressivist movement, again, centered in Geneva. They create a populist moral binary, which is structurally progressivist. A populist moral binary where systemic evil is found in capitalist structures, like Western corporations, U.S. foreign policy, while the virtue is attributed to the organized people, the collective, and their vanguard party. Maduro's camp routinely brands domestic opponents and U.S.-aligned actors as fascist, right? I mean, that is everywhere. You can pretty much count on it. When someone is calling someone a fascist, you know exactly who that person using the term is. They're the fascist or the communist, or they're the same. So they're using that language, fascist or neo-fascist. Venezuelan Vice President Delcy Rodriguez in January 2025 denounced a neo-fascist right-wing uprising across Latin America that didn't exist. But it's the rhetoric. You create the narrative so that you can create the enemy that you want to squash. After the 2024 election in Venezuela, saw efforts to label certain organizations as, again, fascist. And you might remember this. It was around the time when Trump was elected. They really cracked down on speech, particularly on social media. So digital censorship, right? And again, this is what comes out of the European Union. Where did the Digital Services Act come out of? Do you remember off the top of your head? We've talked about that so much. It's been a while. But the Digital Services Act is European. Yes,
I believe so.
Yeah,
I don't know off the top of my head, but that sounds accurate. Yeah,
it's an agency within the European Union that created it, which one of its policies was, if you engage in hate speech on a particular platform, they can fine, ban, shut down that platform. They can keep you from communicating online, which now we've been shut out of X now for over a month.
Yeah.
I mean, for what?
Yeah.
Writing about Mamdani is all I can figure.
No, I mean, obviously we've made enemies out there with people who profess to be coming against technocracy when actually what they're doing is advancing it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we have every reason to believe that it's possible that we're being targeted.
Because it doesn't make any sense. We weren't doing anything against the actual guidelines. So anyway.
Yeah.
So that's what it looks like, digital censorship. This is how it looks. Classic neo-Marxist rhetoric, delegitimizing dissent, not as wrong, but just calling it fascist, which justifies illegal repression in the name of defending democracy and fascism. So you see the same operation working out here among American universities, in politics, just in the culture in general. So this idea, Maduro saying he is loyal to the people, this is like a sacralized rhetoric. He becomes like the religious figure for them to worship, which is always the case in these communo-fascist regimes. The leader becomes the god. You see this, the extreme example in North Korea now, where Kim Jong-il is considered to be a god. All right. Maduro has publicly sworn, again, absolute loyalty to the Venezuelan people in response to Trump's suggestion that he get out. And this is a way for him to present himself as the protector of popular sovereignty in Venezuela, which doesn't exist there. But he uses the language anyway. And pits him as a fight against American imperialism. Let me make this last point, because right after Trump, I don't want to say threatened him. He just said, look, it's time for you to go. You need to find somewhere to go. In other words, he's being gracious to him. He's going to let him leave with his life and I guess take whatever he wants to take with him, his wealth and all of it, I guess. But in a November 2025 rally, after he and Trump had this after the conflict had begun, Maduro appeared in public in battle fatigues. Right, this is classic. This is classic. This is right out of Castro's playbook, right out of all of the communist fascist dictators. And this is when he had that Bolivar sword, and he vowed to defend every inch of Venezuela against the United States, against the imperialist aggression. So this kind of imagery and language functions as a civil religious liturgy, as it always does in these kind of regimes. You see it everywhere. Mao, Lenin, all had this same attribute, this godlike presence, a civil religious liturgy where the people are again sacrosanct, and Maduro is the anointed defender. All right, so again, it's the socialist authoritarian structure in Venezuela. Behind a populist mask, cooperative forms of property dominate, and markets are subordinated to political planning in the name of social needs. This political ideology aims to formally end wage labor exploitation. There you go. That is the Marxist idea of alienation, being alienated from what you produce at work. Because a paycheck is insulting. A paycheck was definitely insulting to Karl Marx, wasn't it? And again, this you saw earlier with Alex Saab, how he used the CLAP food boxes, this charity to feed the Venezuelan people, to enrich himself. But another thing they did with the food distribution was they didn't distribute the food to people and regions who were opposed to them. If there was any dissent in your community or your little region of Venezuela, you didn't get food. That is how communist-fascism works. Okay, so the last part here is what's happened in the past few years that really makes it look, that really exposes the Venezuelan regime, Chavez before, Maduro now, for what they really are, is this increase in social justice rhetoric. They're saying the same things that you'll hear at Columbia University or out at Berkeley or maybe even in your own hometown, probably today, even in your own hometown. Okay, now, is Maduro an instrument of global progressivism? Now, this is where we're going to get into the empire of the city. China and Venezuela again have created this all-weather strategic partnership. That's a big factor, a piece of evidence. Ties to Russia and Iran, well documented, sharing arms, intelligence, and cooperating financially, because they're all aligned against the United States. They are an anti-U.S. geopolitical axis. And we've talked about Hezbollah. So, Summer, Fabian-style progressivism. Fabian socialism is really at the core of what we call the progressivist movement today, which is what some people might identify as the New World Order. I might use that term loosely because I think there are other factions, but this seems to be the one that's most firmly planted, the one that's had the most impact, because it's their rhetoric. You hear everybody like Maduro and leftists in our nation repeating.
Right. So there are these four ultimate global hubs of power.
Ultimately, now, before we get into saying who they are, what you want to listen for to identify what we're about to tell you, this group we're about to tell you about, is you want to listen for these terms or these ideas. Gradual transformation of institutions, right? That's Fabian socialism. When Marxism, classical Marxism failed, because Marx predicted a revolution from the working class. It didn't happen in the West because the working class was well provided for, because capitalism just seems to work that way. When that didn't happen, Fabian socialists decided, look, here's how we're going to do it. The people can't decide for themselves, so they need an elite to tell them what is best for them, and that will be us.
And they also did things like came up with the UN Charter of Human Rights in the 1948,
which is
antithetical to God's law and morality. So,
and yes, that primarily, that would be the first most important point. And then it is also a response to the United States Constitution and founding documents, because, you know, one thing about the founding documents, American founding documents, the Constitution, Declaration of Independence, the Bill of Rights, is that they could be used. They're the finest example of classical liberalism, where the people have individual liberty, but it is all grounded and restrained by the moral law of God. That is exactly what they want to get rid of and destroy, because you can't have the people being loyal to and committed to and faithful to a God.
Yeah, America did something historically distinct. It took the underlying biblical anthropology that man is created equal before God and placed it explicitly at the center of a national declaration. So, you know, it's not the French Revolution. You know, this is we declared that we were going to be living in a consensus that was under God's morality, and that and was foundationally set upon that. And other Western civilizations did that too. Australia, countries in Europe, and Britain. But the American Constitution uniquely took that further.
Right. And that was, and so that's why they want to destroy it. They hate classical liberalism because
they hate Christendom.
Right, and here's why, and then we'll tell you what the Empire of the City is and who it is that has the reins of control in the world right now. So, the Empire of the City, this global progressivist ideology, in the United States, you've seen it in the New Left and everything that has been the left since the Civil Rights Movement, 1964. So in Fabian socialism, or in the ideology of the Empire of the City, well, let's say first what the Bible says about government. According to the Bible, government is ordained by God to restrain evil, punish the wicked, and to serve and protect the good. In other words, the government is there to secure the inalienable rights that every human being is born with because God exists. So the biblical idea of government is the government is there to keep order righteously. But the New Left, the progressivist movement, the Fabian socialists who have the levers of power, more or less, today, they see government as established by man to change society, to bring utopia, right? So the big difference here is that the biblical idea of government is to keep order, but the progressivist idea of government is actually to change or evolve society. Now you see this clearly in Christian socialism. You see this in the mid-20th century with the rise of Christian socialism and the social gospel. Martin Luther King Jr. was certainly a Christian socialist, which is an oxymoron. Those two things can't be together. So he was just a socialist, a communist, more appropriately called. So it's activism versus order, pragmatism over moral law. Sometimes, as George Soros said, the normal rules don't apply and you have to be pragmatic. Okay, Summer. Explain the empire of the city. Who are they?
So the four global hubs of power are London, which is the city, global financial nerve center, hub to Rothschild-linked banking and ESG finance. So that's environmental, social governance. And then you have Washington, D.C., which is the military, industrial, and digital governance arm. Then you've got the Vatican City, which is the religious moral legitimizer and global ethics and interfaith unity hub. And that makes a lot of sense with the things that they've done recently in particular.
Yeah.
The ways that they've been behaving. So, and as well, of course, you have Switzerland, Geneva. So that's the regulatory brain of technocracy, home to the BIS, the WEF, of course, the WHO, UN agencies, and many more. And together, they form the Empire of the City, which is the administrative capitals of global consolidation. So this is really what's driving all of this. This is what's driving the New World Order. And it's not going to be that it might be true that for a time they will move the HQ, if you will, to use an analogy, from, for say, New York City over to China, for example, with the rise of the Global South and the BRICS bloc. But that is only going to be a very temporary thing. It's not going to be like, okay, they're rising and that's how it goes. No, this is part of the game. Because again, it's the carrot on the stick. They always promise the utopia. But the end game is not going to be liberation of humanity. And it's the same people who set the current world system up. It's not a different set of people.
Now, let me take what you've just said and let me bring it back to Maduro for just a moment, because he is an instrument of that movement, the empire of the city.
Correct.
Okay. I've got something on the screen for you guys
Just
here.
like they have their young global leaders that are often become presidents and politicians within governments around the world, Maduro is one of these people that are, put in place, just like Ramaphosa was put in place, just like Mandela was put in place. And it just goes on and on and on. And it looks a little bit different in each society based on the grievances that they can exploit and the research that they've done to psychologically understand how to manipulate that particular population.
So that example you just gave of Nelson Mandela, who was recruited by Klaus Schwab himself and brought to Geneva and trained up at the World Economic Forum and then sent back to South Africa to rule in that
Ramaphosa
that
particularly.
framework. Ramaphosa
Yeah.
now,
Yeah.
Ramaphosa also. So So
and look at how he's acting. He's emboldened, because he's speaking so boldly against the United States and against Trump. Well, why do you think he's allowed to do that? Because he's got handlers, and those handlers happen to be in Geneva. They're in Davos.
Yeah, and that's ultimately what they've done with Maduro as well. So we have to look back a little bit at Chavez. When Hugo Chavez came to power, he rewrote Venezuela's constitution to establish what he called the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela. Notably, the new constitution abandoned classical liberal republican language. So it's important to point out again right here that Venezuela was one of the most prosperous, one of the wealthiest nations in the world once they had, found oil in their area of the world. Very quickly became extremely wealthy, prosperous. People were well off. And then these guys come along, and this has happened many times in South America through different dictators. So when Chavez rewrote the Venezuelan constitution, abandoned the classical liberal republican language and replaced it with references to a democratic and social state of law and justice. They particularly got rid of any language in the Constitution that sounded like classical liberalism. So this shift signaled a deliberate move away from limited government, checks and balances, private property protections, and Western rule of law framework. And it moved toward, again, the centralized, ideological, redistributive state, something called participatory democracy, controlled by the ruling party and revolutionary socialist principles guiding all institutions. That's what we call here in America with the Soviet-style Marxism in the early and mid-20th century on up through the 70s and 80s as the long march through the institutions.
Right. And we also have to say that Venezuela was historically a Christian nation before its collapse under socialist communist governance. And that's always the theme. They really can't stand, they go after countries that have the Christian moral order, the moral norms and the social fabric being Christian. They go after those countries and then, disassemble them and deconstruct them.
That's I'm glad you said that because I hadn't mentioned that.
Yeah,
yet.
I mean they weren't Christian in the biblical Reformation sense, and in the sense that the Protestant nations were shaped by Scripture, but in the sense that its social fabric and moral norms and public life were explicitly Christianized through Roman Catholic heritage, yes, but also later through widespread evangelical growth in the 20th century.
A lot of mission work went to
So, and that was what was going on. Again, South Africa, it was a Christian nation.
Yeah.
This is the common thread in particular. Of course, they'll do it other places too, but in particular, they have a particular appetite for squashing Christendom. So it's always the same. It's like it's the same formula to take these countries out, and it might some take years, some take decades.
Yeah. So this is a good point to make because it's an ideological realignment of an area where you have to get the Christian heritage, whether they're Bible believers, really faithful or not. It's like the founding of America. It was done in a Christian heritage. It was just the consensus was Christian. So they have to do an ideological realignment to set the stage for the collapse of democratic structures so that the authoritarian rule can rise. And here's one point about Venezuela that's important. I mentioned that Chavez created a political ideology called Bolivarianism. And Maduro to this day holds that same political philosophy. Bolivarianism is taken from, this is interesting because you see how they use ideas from classical liberalism while saying they hate it, and then they want to appropriate anything good so they can use that social capital. Simón Bolívar, who lived from 1783 to 1830, is known as the liberator of northern South America. He was a classical Republican influenced by Enlightenment constitutionalism. He was very wary of dictatorship and was committed to lawful, limited government. Hugo Chavez and Nicolás Maduro, however, have systematically appropriated this man's name. He was a hero in South America, a liberator in the classical liberal and Christian sense. But they appropriated the man's name because they knew that people were familiar with him as a hero and they could use that social capital that he had earned for their benefit. They appropriated his name, his image, and his symbolism to legitimize their socialist, centralized, authoritarian state, in total contradiction to Bolivar's own political vision. So this Bolivarian republic in Venezuela today is not an extension of Bolivar's ideas. It is a deliberate repurposing of his legacy, transforming a champion of constitutional liberty into the mascot of a revolutionary socialist project defined by state control, ideological conformity, and the erosion of individual rights. And that brings me to this point. Let's connect Maduro to the crown. You want to do that? Because that connects him right to the empire of the city.
Right.
Because the crown and the city of London, we mentioned those pretty much interchangeably.
Right, and we also have to, of course, bring up the king, who is the defender of, quote, many faiths.
Yeah.
So he's a total sellout. He's not a defender of the Protestant Christian faith. And he's very explicit about his, excitement for all of the climate garbage and, everything in the Marxian handbook. I mean, he's just totally a cheerleader for all of it, so...
So that brings us to this idea called the third way, which became Venezuela's ideological bridge into global progressivism. Now, here's how it plays out. This is how you connect Maduro to the empire of the city, what we call roughly the New World Order or the progressivist movement.
And all of this process, by the way, just to throw it out there, like to give you the 80,000-foot view, this is about creating the global citizen. So it's about stripping people of their culture, their traditions, their values, stripping it all away. But specifically, any semblance of the Christian worldview.
Yeah, that's what we that was expressed when we said that he believes in this idea of participatory democracy. That's the collective. That's the global collective. Now, although Venezuela presents itself as a federal, decentralized republic, the influences on Hugo Chavez's political evolution away from classical liberal restraints, he would see them as restraints, of course, a foundational element of the Bolivarian Revolution. Remember, that's Chavez's revolution, where he took the name of a good man and appropriated it for these evil purposes. These influences, this shows the role played by something called the Third Way, which is a political formula popularized in the 1990s by British Prime Minister Sir Tony Blair. Tony Blair's Third Way was conceived as a moderate renewal of social democracy. Now listen to what this is. It's a middle ground between classical liberalism and communism, which is dialectic, right? That is
synthesis.
That is a synthesis between the two, which is exactly what Martin Luther King or Stanley Levinson and these mid-20th century communists in America were working for. Blair's Third Way was conceived as a moderate renewal of social democracy, blending market economics with social justice commitments. So where do you think Maduro and Chavez got their social justice language from? framed by a communitarian ethic of rights and responsibilities. Its purpose in the UK was to rehabilitate the left after the collapse of Soviet communism while avoiding the radical privatization associated with Thatcherism. But in Venezuela, the third way served a very different purpose. When Hugo Chavez first came to power, international observers, including Tony Blair himself, urged Chavez to adopt this balanced, market-friendly, centrist, Fabian socialist third way formula. Chavez publicly acknowledged being encouraged by Blair's direction, at one point stating publicly that he was pursuing neither capitalism nor communism, which again, there you go. Fabian socialism expressed in Venezuela by the man who established the political ideology that exists there
Which,
today.
by the way, we know that the globalists, the people, the hidden hand, whatnot, they use communist and fascist tactics to cut up liberty.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, that's a good point. You've written about that.
We've written about that
What do we call those?
extensively.
We call those the ism blades.
They are the ism blades. Yes.
We have that graphic. Okay, this rhetoric of moderation. When you see moderation, read that as synthesis. That's the dialectic at work, where you've got the status quo. You've got two things that seem to be that are opposed, and you're trying to work toward communism, but you can't jump straight to it. You got to get there one step at a time. So this rhetoric of moderation gave Chavez diplomatic cover, right? It was his disguise at a time when Venezuela still depended on foreign investment, global financial institutions, and international oil partnerships. So while they were still dependent on Western civilization to survive, Chavez used this third way language to get support from basically Europe, particularly the Empire of the City. However, Chavez never fully embraced Blair's moderate socialist program. Instead, he appropriated the third way as a dialectical narrative of transition or synthesis as a temporary ideological bridge that softened the image of his hardline authoritarian movement while he gradually dismantled any and all remaining constitutional limits to his power. As soon as he consolidated control over that United Socialist Party of Venezuela, the judiciary, control over the constitutional, classical liberal form of government that was there. When he got control over that, he took control of the judiciary, the national legislature. Chavez discarded any pretense of centrism and declared something called the dawn of the socialismo del siglo, XXI, or 21. In this sense, is that like the agenda for the 21st century there? In this sense, the third way functioned for Venezuela as a dialectical midpoint, a managed transition between the late liberal order and the renewed socialist project he intended from the beginning. Under Nicolás Maduro, this dialectical maneuver deepened. So Maduro has taken it even farther. Right? The people in Venezuela under Chavez were oppressed and under a socialist dictator, but they still had a bit of their economy left. They still had some access to a little prosperity, very controlled. Under Maduro, this dialectical maneuver deepened and took on a distinctly global progressivist flavor. While maintaining the Marxist-Leninist economic structure inherited from Chavez, Maduro repackaged it in the vocabulary of 21st century transitional progressivism, Fabian socialism, in using terms like, which is expressed in terms like climate justice, inclusive governance, human rights-based redistribution, and digital identity infrastructure, aligned with, of course, the United Nations and World Economic Forum frameworks. So the regime's alliances with global technocratic institutions now, today, frame Venezuelan socialism not as merely a national revolution, but as part of a worldwide movement toward equitable governance and a new international order. There you go.
Exactly.
Venezuela's ideological evolution demonstrates the broader global pattern. The third way becomes the gateway language, right? A midpoint framing that's used not to secure genuine moderation, but to guide societies through a controlled transition from classical liberal order to technocratic progressive governance. So it is a camouflage. Folks, what we're trying to point out to you here, what Summer's been writing about now for months, what we've been trying to point out, if you want to see what they're trying to do right here, look at South Africa. And now we can tell you, since it's in the news, look at Venezuela. This is why.
Well, and
I
look
believe,
at
I
the state
haven't-
of Europe. Look at, Austria. Look at
Yeah.
the United Kingdom. Look
Yeah,
at
you can-
Ireland. Just
Yeah, we've seen that play out historically and contemporaneously as well. Right now it's playing out in Scotland, Ireland. Paul Craven.
Yeah, all the Commonwealth of
Tells us
Nations,
about this.
all the Commonwealth of Nations countries have been absorbed into this new digital system a lot faster than we have.
So why does Maduro use this language when he obviously doesn't believe in it, right? He doesn't believe in equitable governance, obviously. He doesn't believe in climate justice, inclusive governance, human rights, or any of that. Why does he use the language? Because it gives, as it gave Chavez a camouflage, now it provides Maduro with international legitimacy with nations or players like China, Iran, these places that we mentioned earlier.
Well, the thing is again, it comes down to what we've been saying about, social emotional learning and UNESCO's Common Core curricula that has infiltrated people's minds, and so they've all been primed to be triggered by this kind of language, like they're going to be like having this knee-jerk, this is my tribe. They are saying all the slogans and catchphrases that I have been trained to respond to say, so, because what they're trying to do is the globalists, they're trying to become the new moral authority. They want to be the new moral authority, and then that means that they have to totally negate this, the Christian worldview. So I keep being redundant with that, but that's ultimately what it's about, because they really want to universalize morality without God, and this is part of that program. It is a program. It's a counterfeit worldview and ideology that has captured people's minds. And when they say sustainable development, we brought this up last time. Sustainability is actually a very key word, because it's through the indoctrination of people into their worldview paradigm that they are able to keep this thing going.
Sustainability means they want to sustain
sustainable.
Their project.
Yeah, to sustain their project, they've got to have enough people that are captured by this illusion so that they can uphold it.
All right, let me land this plane and tell the people, too, that we're currently now working on an article or something, some kind of detailed, probably be fairly long write-up on the Empire of the City, the evidence for it and our theories about it, and then you can make up your mind as to what you think about whether or not that's how it's actually playing out. So let me take you through this last piece here. Again, I wanted to say this. I didn't ask Summer her opinion on this, but I would say that this is why I believe Trump should send the U.S. military into Venezuela and remove this cat as quickly as possible. Because Maduro is, his presence is causing human suffering. All throughout his nation, throughout the region, and right on into the United States of America. He has declared war on us, so we should take him out. Now, so I'll say this. I don't know. I'm saying that's my opinion because I didn't ask you before we came here what you thought about that, so you can think about that for a while before you decide what you think
Well, I'll say this, there's a legitimate case to be made for why we should be doing that. But then I will also say that from they want to win the argument, they want to win the narrative, they want to be seen as the moral authority. So now they have this opportunity to take that situation and never let a crisis go to waste. And there's lots of fodder for all of these people that have been indoctrinated and primed for this moment to then go, look, Trump's a dictator. Look, Trump's being, Trump is being mean, and he doesn't care about human rights and all the same crap that they do. So there's a big opportunity for them to go, look at what Trump's doing in South Africa. Look at what Trump's doing in Venezuela to prove their Marxist narrative, ideologically informed worldview. You know what I mean? So it's like, they're going to be doing that, whether or not it's the reality of the situation is that the drugs are getting in that way. You know what I mean? Like, so that's the harsh reality that we're in. And they know that we're in that conundrum because at the end of the day, they control the global narrative. Like they have control of the mass media. And they do actually control the algorithms as well. Like we know that our message always gets suppressed. We are constantly getting our message suppressed. So just to be aware of that facet of it. Like absolutely, I'm for stemming the flow of any lethal substances coming in across the border. Absolutely, 100%.
Well, we didn't nip it in the bud back then, so we have to go in and do the hard thing now.
But the thing is all of that, there's going to be baggage. So.
Well, while we may not fully trust the brain trust in Washington, D.C., I'll speak for myself again because I'm about to say something you might disagree. I don't want to speak for you on this point, but we don't fully trust politicians in Washington. But we can, nevertheless, hold out hope that Trump is an anti-communist, that he might be an anti-progressivist, and that he's determined to bring an end to the scourge of the iron fist hidden within Maduro's velvet glove in Venezuela.
And I would say maybe or maybe not.
Yeah, that's harsh consequences for Maduro could bring hope to the severely demoralized people of Venezuela and return their dysfunctionally destabilized economy back to at least a livable measure of peace and prosperity, Lord willing. So when you look at the news about this today, about Venezuela and the U.S., Maduro and Trump, how should you look? How should you read it? What should you be looking for? I'll give you a couple guidelines. Whenever you see terms like loyalty to the people, ask which people. Because Maduro is not loyal to the Venezuelan people. He's loyal to the Crown, the city of London, Vatican City,
D.C.,
not Washington,
Geneva.
D.C. necessarily. Of course, the radical leftist wing of Washington, D.C. And, of course, that whole project originates out of Geneva, where you find the multilateral institutions like the UN and the WEF and all the rest.
And I would say that it's possible. I'm not really convinced that Trump's not somehow controlled opposition in some way. It's really hard for me to believe that he wouldn't be.
Yeah.
That would be my position on it. But
so anytime you hear people like Maduro or even leftists in the United States using the language of the people, in practice, it means a revolutionary. It means revolution, right? It's because what we see happening is that citizens who dissent, churches that preach the gospel, independent media, like us, in a sense, right? Ministries like, Christian media ministries like ourselves are going to be treated as enemies of the people. So you got to pay close attention to that language of the people, right? Whenever you see sanctions relief, ask who benefits from that. Whenever our government or any other makes deals that allow oil companies to go back in and do business with Venezuela without any kind of real reform, That just is going to keep enriching the cartel state ecosystem, who's going to keep poisoning our people. They don't restore rule of law or biblical justice. They feed the machine, the machine that's poisoning our people with cocaine and fentanyl. Whenever you see headlines about drug flows, migrant caravans, or border chaos, ask, is it strategic? Because almost none of that today is organic. It's true that many cartels are opportunists, but we saw earlier Department of Justice language about Maduro deploying narcotics as a weapon tells you that some of these actors see narcotics as a form of warfare. It's not just about getting rich. It's about destroying the United States. Whenever you hear Western elites praise dialogue, like the Pope at the top of the show, Trump, you should be seeking dialogue here. Whenever you hear stuff like that, ask, what worldview do they share? Who is the Pope really loyal to? Is he more loyal to Maduro than he is his own homeland? Many people in Europe and North America have lost faith in biblical categories of sin, justice, and God-given rights. They're attracted to the idea of a managed society where enlightened planners, central planners, socialists, communists, redistribute wealth and engineer the culture. Remember, one of the main ways to tell what a politician or pundit or some figurehead, to tell which side they're on, is what do they see the purpose of government as being? Is it to keep order, to restrain evil, to punish the wicked, to secure rights and protect the good? Or do they see government, the purpose of government, to evolve society? That's what Maduro believes. That's what he's trying to do in Venezuela. So when you read about Venezuela today, don't just see a local crisis that's happening down there. You can look at that as a model for what they're trying to do right here. Maduro's playing a part in that. See a test case for a global progressive project, which is a world without transcendent law, without objective morality, without Christ, that is governed instead by technocrats, party bosses, and at the barrel of a gun. So at the root of all this is a theological issue, as everything is. And the question is, who is God and who decides what is good and evil? From the beginning, Satan's lie to Eve was not simply, hey, break that rule, empower yourself. It wasn't even about secret knowledge. It was, you will be like God, knowing good and evil. Genesis 3:5. What that means is you'll be the standard. You'll have the authority to decide what is moral, what is good and evil. You will define reality. You will be autonomous. Maduro's people's sovereignty is just this. It's a collectivized version of Satan's original lie. The people, expressed through the party, will decide what is good and evil. There is no higher law, no objective moral order, no king above the state. Scripture becomes either a tool of the revolution, as it did in the day of Martin Luther King Jr., or an enemy of the revolution. Biblically, this is blasphemous. God is the lawgiver, James 4:12. Civil rulers are ministers of God, servants, not gods, Romans 13:1-4. And the Great Commission, all authority in heaven and on earth belongs to Christ. So when these rulers claim the right to redefine marriage, family, property, or even biological sex, when they use terms like anti-imperialism, anti-colonialist, anti-racist, they're reenacting the fall. They're reaching for the tree of the knowledge of good and evil to claim moral autonomy. Our own American founding was far from perfect, but it is still the best that's ever been. What the founders determined and established was that rights are unalienable because they come from the Creator, not from the state. Liberty is only possible for a virtuous people who are morally restrained by the law of God. Again, for the 900th time this year, John Adams said our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate to the government of any other. And by religious and by virtuous, they meant Christian. That is the opposite of Maduro's theory of power. It's the opposite of the progressivist project for a globalist utopia, the agenda for the 21st century. For Maduro and the progressivists in the empire of the city, there is no law above the revolution. The people organized in the party arrogate themselves to the prerogatives of God. The tragedy is that many in the West, many in America today, especially those on the left, have adopted that same view in a little softer form, because that's how the dialectic works. It's going the same direction. They speak of evolving morality, living constitutions, and being on the right side of history, all of which mean the same thing. We will decide collectively what is good and evil now. Again, echoing Satan's original lie. So from there, it's a short step to justifying censorship in the name of protecting democracy, justifying expropriation in the name of equity, as we see in South Africa with the land, trying to take the land away from the Boers, the white people in Africa, South Africa. Justifying abortion and even euthanasia in the name of dignity. Different policies, same rebellion. It is the knowledge of good and evil seized apart from God. That is why the Western project of spreading democracy is a fool's errand. It's a lie. A constitutional republic with far-reaching liberties is not a plug-and-play system. It requires a Christian worldview at its foundation. It requires a transcendent lawgiver, a doctrine of sin that restrains these utopian fantasies. It requires a belief in the image of God that protects human life and conscience. Without that framework, without that foundational and transcendent truth, democracy becomes mob rule or just a mask for oligarchic power. You can't simply drop ballots and constitutions into cultures that reject biblical categories and expect a Madisonian self-government to appear. That's ridiculous, George Bush. America's system was historically unique, not because Americans are better people, but because there was, at least for a time, a broad Christian consensus about law, morality, and the dignity of the individual. As that consensus continues to erode in the West, our institutions are being hollowed out, exactly like you see in the history of Venezuela. If we lose our grounding in the moral law of God, tyranny is inevitable, whether it marches under a red flag or a rainbow flag. So what do we do with all of this? First of all, don't be naive. Recognize Maduro and regimes like his for what they are. Recognize the progressivists for what they are. Instruments of a broader anti-Christian, anti-liberty project. They want to destroy you. They want to destroy America. When you see drugs, border chaos, and propaganda, understand these not only as social problems, but as strategic weapons in a spiritual war that's playing out at the level of the culture. Don't be seduced Beware of this language of social justice and equity and the people when it is detached from God's law. Satan rarely sells evil as evil. Right? He sells it as compassion, fairness, or progress. The original pitch Satan made in Eden sounded really good. Also, you have to be committed to recovering a biblical doctrine of authority. Teach your kids and your churches, for that matter, that rulers are accountable to God, that justice is defined by His character, and that no majority vote can make sin righteous or make oppression just. Most importantly, stand firm in the gospel, because ultimately, the only answer to Maduro's counterfeit kingdom, the West's self-destructive progressivism, is the true kingdom of Christ, which is won by preaching the gospel. Christ alone is the king who dies for his enemies rather than sacrificing them for his power. He alone can free men and nations from the bondage of sin that makes this kind of tyranny attractive to the heart of man. The cross tells us that justice and mercy meet at Calvary, not in socialist utopias or technocratic schemes. The resurrection tells us that history is not marching inevitably toward Marxist classless society or Davos's digital panopticon, but toward the return of the King who will judge the nations in righteousness. Until that day, our task is clear. We understand very clearly what we're here to do. Preach Christ crucified and risen. Expose the lies of autonomous people's sovereignty and defend your liberty. As long as God grants us the strength, those remnants of order and liberty that still reflect His moral law and our public life will be protected if we are faithful. So, may the Lord give us discernment to read this moment rightly, and the courage to speak plainly, and the faith to rest not in princes or in parties, but in the Son, whom He has installed on His holy hill. That is Psalm 2. Okay, that's all I've got. Sorry, there you go.
Amen.
All right, any closing remarks?
No closing remarks.
Okay, my friends, thank you for being with us tonight.
Wait.
Okay.
We did talk about we would do
Yes,
Reverend Matthew Littlefield's
can you put
book.
the graphic up there of the book? And I'll tell the people. Yeah, so for those of you who are still with us, the few of you who are with us tonight, we're going to give away a couple books. 2 books. The same book, but 2 copies of Matthew Littlefield's Like a Roaring Lion. How
There it
Satan
is.
is
It's
working
up
to
there.
destroy, how the evil one is working to destroy you. And there's the book. We're going to give away 2 copies of that, and all you have to do to qualify is, what, Summer?
Subscribe.
Subscribe to our Substack.
Yes, go to armoroftruth.net. It'll take you straight to our Substack.
And it's free to do that, right?
And it's free to do that. Just
It's free to
subscribe.
subscribe. You can support us if you like. We don't have a paywall there yet. We don't,
The first 2 people to do that will get the book.
Right,
We'll ship it out to you.
the first 2 people, now for the people who are subscribed,
They can send us a direct message.
okay, if you are subscribed to Substack already,
Send us a direct
send
message.
us a
over
direct
there.
message on Substack. So the first 2 people to subscribe to our Substack, or if you're already subscribed, send us a direct message there, we'll get a copy of this excellent book.
Yeah, it's so great.
If you're not familiar with this, watch the last live stream we did with Matthew Littlefield, right here. Mm-hmm. The author of Like a Roaring Lion. All right, so get over there, subscribe to our Substack, or if you're subscribed, send us a direct message, and if you can, we would really appreciate your support as we prepare for
2026.
2026. We'd love to be with you all year next year, and we need your help to do that. There are links in the description below this video to help you find a way to support Armor of Truth, or go to our Substack. You'll find them there as well. To get to our Substack the easy way, just go to armoroftruth.net. That'll take you right there. Okay, my friends, God bless you, and we hope this has been a blessing to you and useful. Christ is King, and we want to always honor him and keep him central to everything that we do, and we hope we've done that for you here tonight. So we'll see you next time.
See you next time, guys. God bless you.
Seek ye the truth, and the truth will make you free, and nothing else will do it. Jesus Christ has never lied to anybody. Why won't you listen to him?
And man will either worship the one true God, or man will worship a lie.
You must stay away from people who will not document as fact what they put in their articles. That's why my broadcast scares the hell out of socialists. That's why I was named as the most dangerous radio host in America, because I shoot documented facts which cannot be refuted. That's what's dangerous. Don't spread a rumor. Spread the truth. Document it. Prove it. Make it irrefutable, and you too will become dangerous.
It's time to speak out. Speak out. Speak out.
Tweet it, blog it, Facebook it.
Shout it out to your neighbors and tell everyone you know.
You see, what happens when you broadcast the truth is you piss everybody off.
Faith is resistance.